Hey YouTube, Apple iDev here. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for viewing my videos. After just about a month, I have 43 subscribers and almost 1,600 views, so thank you for that. Sorry I haven't posted many videos lately. My life's been kind of crazy. Hopefully I'll get a few videos up this week to keep you guys moving. Having said that, we're going to get right into today's lesson. Today we're just going to go back to basics. We're just going to talk about really just what Objective-C is and how it's similar and different to other languages. So first we're going to cover similarities to other languages. Similarities include primitive data types. There are ints, just like in any other language. If we were to say my int equals 5, that's valid. If we were to say double, or let's start with float, my float equals 5.5, that's valid. Double, my double, whatever works. There's a new data type in C that most other languages don't have, which is called a long double, which is essentially just a 64-bit version of double. And there's of course just a regular long, which is just like any other long, but it's again an integer type. And one thing that Objective-C adds is a short, which is essentially an integer, but an integer is 32 bits, a short is just 16 bits. So if memory is really crucial in your application, and you just want to hold a one-digit number or whatever, you can say my short equals 5, and that works wonderfully. So that's the purpose of my short. Or of the short data type. So that's really it for primitive data types. The next thing that we're going to talk about are arrays. And what we're going to see with arrays are that they're the same in principle. You can access them the same way. They look pretty much the same. The only difference is how you initially declare it. If you're used to Java, really it's mostly in Java, but if you're used to Java, you're used to declaring arrays like this. Yeah, but in C languages in general, that just doesn't fly. What instead you're going to do is you're going to say int my array bracket 5 closing bracket semicolon. And that declares your array. That's it. You don't need to create it because it just created your object for you. So that's how you do that. And it's really nifty. It's a lot shorter. It's a lot cleaner. It looks better, personally, to me. And that's just something to keep in mind. And you can access and set things the same way. If you're to say my array 0 equals 14, it's perfectly valid. You access everything the same way. Or you can declare arrays like this. If you were to say my array with no number in the brackets, and you said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's perfectly valid too. It just declared a 5-element array with numbers 1 through 5. Next are looping structures. The for loop is the same. We'll say when x is less than 10, x plus plus, we'll say ns log, and we'll just say %d, comma, x. And you can see, it works perfectly the same. While loops. We're not going to cover a while loop yet, just because of the different types of Boolean variables in Objective-C and other C languages. Actually, it's completely different in Objective-C than other C languages. So we're not going to worry about that for now. Do loops, same thing. So yeah, those are basically all the same. And the last thing is enums, enumerated types. And enumerated types are sort of the same. They're the same in the sense that you can enumerate a type which has certain constants that can be evaluated to it. But the catch is that all it really does is it creates constants. It doesn't say, okay, this type can only hold these constants. It just creates constants that can be evaluated to that type, and all it really does is it helps your code become more readable and make more sense. And I'll show you here in just a second. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to say int temp1, and I'll say int temp2, and I'll say my temp3, and my temp4. Alright, and those are going to give me errors at the moment, but then what you're going to do is you're going to, the way you create enumerated types is you're first going to say type def, and your type is going to be, the type is going to be enum, that's what you're defining, and you're going to say a bracket, and in here we're going to define hot, medium, cold. That's a convention in Objective-C and C languages in general. Constants have K's in front of them rather than just being in all caps like in Java or things like that. And down here, we're just going to create the type, so we'll call it myTemp. And we'll put a semicolon, and that closes that out. Oh, it's still going to give me an error because I'm declaring them before the type. Okay, fine, we can play it this way. So we'll drag those down here. And we'll just delete those lines. Alright, so what you're going to see is you see it recognizes that that's a defined type and it turns it green. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you something. If I assign temp1, let's say, I'm just going to put in a couple of comments here. Let's say hot equals 0, medium equals 1, cold equals 2. Alright, so if I assign temp1 to hot and temp2 to cold. Alright, now I'm going to do the same thing for the myTemps. I'm going to say temp3 equals k hot and temp4 equals k cold. Now, which of these sets of code is easier to read? Yes, technically 0 and 2 are pretty simple numbers, but who wants to keep looking? And if someone else is reading your code, they don't know what that 0 and 2 mean. They have to come back up here, look at these numbers, try and figure it out. If they know that temp3 is hot and temp4 is cold right off the bat, ultimately it's the same thing. And the cool thing about this is that when you define an enumerated type, every one of the constants just holds an integer. So literally k hot right now, k hot equals 0, k cold equals 1, or k medium, sorry, and k cold equals 2. So literally it is the exact same thing. Each of these variables holds the exact same value. I could hold, if I wanted to change this to temp4 equals 2, it would actually still assign k cold to it. But for simplicity, we're going to keep it as k cold. But long story short, it just makes your code easier to read for other people. Just all in all, it's much easier, cleaner. So try and use enumerated types if you're only working with constants. It just makes everything a lot easier. Now we're going to go into differences. What you're going to notice, first we're going to talk about main methods. The biggest thing is that in Objective-C, like in C and C++, etc., your main method is not void. In Java specifically, your main method is void, public static void main. That's what you memorize. But in Objective-C, your main method is an int method. And that's essentially just a more efficient way to let the operating system know if anything went wrong. The convention is that if the program operated normally, the program returns 0, and the operating system sees that and does nothing. If the program executed with an error, it will return a negative number, which will generally be an error code, and that's why your error codes are never positive numbers, they're always negative numbers. You'll see error negative 5204, and that's because that's a certain error code that the application returned. So now that makes sense to you, yay. So that's just a convention. So the first thing you're going to notice is that while you can have an implied return in a void method, you can't do that in a main method in Objective-C. Your main methods have to have return 0 at the end. You can see if I comment out this line, I believe I will get an error. Let's see here. No, I guess they don't get mad for implied returns. But again, it's just a good practice, because if your program returns something that you don't want it to, essentially all that does, having the return 0 at the end, is it prevents any unexpected occurrences, and unexpected is always bad in programming. You always want to know what's happening. So, yeah, just make sure you are doing that right. That being said, last but not least, actually 2 things left. What we're going to go into right now is we're going to talk about structs. And a struct is essentially something, it's similar to an enumerated type, but better. It's like creating an object, but instead of having to write an entire class for that object, you can do it in like 4 lines of code. And it's very similar to an enum. You started out with typedef, but then you're going to say struct, and what you're going to do is inside you're going to give it fields. These are different. These would be like parameters in a constructor in Java, or the same thing in really any other language. And what you'd say is, you can say things like, let's say we're doing it in a box, and we want to say x, y, which is going to be the location on the screen, and we say length, width, which are going to be the length and width of the box. And for the name, we're going to say, we'll call the struct, we'll just call it boxes. And now what you're going to see is if I just tried to create a new boxes object, and I just say boxes my box, the thing that you have to be careful of is that in C, it automatically assigns your variables to 0, and you don't want to take that chance. So instead of just defining it like an object, what you should do is you should say my box, and let's say we want it to be 200 pixels over, 200 pixels down, and we want it to be a 30 by 30 box. Oh, sorry, that would be like creating a constructor. The way you actually have to set them up is, sorry, I haven't been working with structs in a long time. You say mybox.x. It's like calling in a public instance variable in other languages. Mybox.x equals 200. Mybox.y equals 200. Mybox.length equals 30. And mybox.width equals 30. So you can see it's a pretty simple way to create an object without having to actually write an entire class. And you can access them the same way. If you wanted to, you can treat them like regular integers. If you wanted to say mybox.length equals mybox.x plus mybox.y, that's a completely valid statement. So just understand how structs work. They're going to be very useful to you. I haven't used them in a long time. I also generally don't program in plain Objective-C. Generally I use Cocoa now, which is a completely different concept. We're not going to worry about that. The last thing you need to worry about is bools. In any other language, or most other languages at least, you have a Boolean. Like in Java, to declare a Boolean variable, you would say Boolean. You'd say Boolean my bool equals true. Here, that just doesn't fly. That's not an actual data type. The data type that you're going to be using is called bool, in all caps, and it can hold values of either yes. If I say yes, that's valid, or if I say no, that's valid. Make sure they're all in caps. Again, C is a strongly typed language, so make sure you get that right. For regular C, you might be used to doing bool in lowercase. Don't do that. It's just going to mess up the compiler. The compiler tries to compile in 2 different languages. It gets really confusing. Just stick to the regular bool in all caps. And that's about it. You can manipulate these any way you want to. The one thing you have to be careful of is that in most C languages, or like most C languages, Objective-C, rather than having an actual Boolean type where Boolean just holds true and that's the value, or yes and that's the value, it's technically an int. My bool, you could assign it a value of 1, and that would be like, and that's the same as no. Or if you assign it a value of 0, that's like saying yes. So that's the one thing we have to watch out for. A lot of times you'll see programmers get into the habit of returning a Boolean method and returning like a number subtracting from another number, and they're assuming they'll get either 0 or 1. That's a bad programming practice. It's a good way to get someone to hack into your code, send it a number it's not prepared for, mess up a method, and ultimately you will not be happy. So make sure that rather than using 0s and 1s, you really try and stick to those no's and yeses. And that's really it for bools. So that's it for today's lesson. I know this was kind of a long one for a lot of review, but it's really important to get that stuff out of the way. So thanks for watching. Look for more tutorials later this week. Please subscribe. See you later.